Welcome back to 10 Tips P class. This is lesson 2. So, last time we talked a little bit about My Plate. We reviewed the different food groups and the recommendations within each one to make healthy choices. Now, this class focuses more on the grocery budget than the groceries themselves, but they go hand in hand. So today we're going to talk about meal planning. Now, how many of you plan meals in advance? How about prepare portions of a meal in advance? Say something like cooking a batch of rice on the weekend to eat all week. How much time do you spend cooking a meal? Is it more than 30 minutes or less than 30 minutes on any given night?
Which of these other statements are true for you? Being efficient in the kitchen is about more than just cooking quickly. Even if you don't consider yourself a good cook or a fast cook, there are a lot of things you can do to prepare yourself and set yourself up for success.
Now, just like lesson 1, we have a 10 tips sheet, or a list of different ways, 10 different ways specifically, to build a healthy meal. So, some recommendations, of course, refer to things that we talked about with My Plate, like making half of your plate fruits and vegetables, including whole grains. Don't forget the dairy. Those ones we've covered a little bit already. Now, some of the other tips on here are a little bit more challenging. Things like getting creative in the kitchen and trying new foods. That can be a big challenge for a lot of families. However, it can help you to stretch your budget a little more if you're able to be flexible.
Remember that everything you eat and drink matters, so use these 10 tips to just make one small change this week. Maybe it's choosing fruit for dessert, or trying a new food, or swapping out some lean protein or beans in place of meat in one meal.
Next, we'll look at one way to plan some meals in advance. This is your weekly grocery planner page. You have a copy of this in the packet that was mailed to you, but I'll also put one on the screen so that you can see how I might break things down.
Notice that this planner shows space for 3 meals a day, plus one line for snacks as well for every day of the week. To keep it simple, we'll just focus on dinner, and if you like this way of planning, you can expand and add more meals as you go.
So, what are some things that might influence your meal plan in a week? Well, think about when you might get a paycheck or a benefits check. That can influence when you go grocery shopping and what you have to eat before then. Or maybe there's a night that you go out to eat or you get takeout. That could influence what you're planning around and whether you get leftovers from that meal or not. How about, that cabbage has been sitting in the fridge since last week. You might want to put that into your meal plan.
Take a moment to think about what else might factor into your meal plan each week. This list gives some examples, but there may be more depending on your needs each week.
Remember, when we're thinking about the food in our kitchen, you can use all of the resources you have available to you. If you have a fridge, that's awesome. If you have a pantry or a place you can store dried foods, that's a great way to have a few things on hand. And if you have a freezer, especially a freezer with enough space that you can store a few meals or pieces of meals, those are some great tools to have a lot of items at the ready to create a quick, healthy meal on any given night.
So let's lay out a sample meal plan. You'll notice in the notes section, I've added a few guiding principles. 1, repurpose your leftovers or freeze a portion for a later meal. 2, check what's in the fridge, pantry, and freezer first. 3, cook once, eat all week. So let's start with night 1. This happens to be Sunday night on our meal plan, but the idea is this is the night after we've gone grocery shopping. This would be the night to plan a recipe or a meal that requires a little bit more effort and the correct ingredients. For this one, I put roasted chicken and vegetables. So that night, I purposely plan to cook more than I can eat. Roast a whole chicken, roast a whole pan of vegetables, throw everything in the oven, and that way, not only is it a hands-off meal, but also you're creating leftovers for the rest of the week. So what could you do with leftover chicken? I think I'll put chicken tacos on the menu. Of course, this means I would have to have bought a few items to make these tacos when I went grocery shopping. So having things on hand that you can create other meals with is really useful. If you know you like tacos, having some taco shells and cheddar cheese and a little bit of salsa can make it much easier to pull together a meal like this last minute. Now, once you've cleaned that meat off the chicken, you still have the bones. So this would be a great time to make some stock and to create a soup that you like. I'll use the example of kale, white bean, and chicken soup. This is one of my favorites for fall and winter. Whatever soup you choose, make sure to make a big batch and freeze a couple portions for a future meal. Next, I would choose a meal that can take a lot of leftovers and bits and ends of things. Something like a stir fry that will use up any leftover vegetables from last week or from the roasted vegetables on Sunday, or even extra vegetables that you bought at the grocery store this week. Your protein here could be a meat that you have in the freezer from a previous week's sale, or it could be a lower-cost vegetarian protein like tofu or tempeh, or even just some fried eggs on top would be great. Next, think of a meal that you can use just your pantry for. Something like a pasta night, or rice and beans. Something simple and quick that uses only items from your pantry. Next, utilize that freezer. If you made a big batch of something in a previous week, pull out a few portions for this week. Something like chili would freeze well. For the last night of our meal plan, you can choose to either use the guiding principles and create another meal out of items you have in the pantry or freezer, or eat leftovers from earlier this week. Or if it's part of your regular week, maybe this is the day you get takeout. Enjoy food from a restaurant that you didn't have to cook. I hope these examples give you a good sense of how to lay out a simple meal plan for your week.
Now this next page is a sample of a way that you could structure your grocery list. As you'll see, it's broken down by the food groups we've already talked about, so you can take a look when you write down all the items on your list and just notice, did you remember to put vegetables on your list? Do you have anything in the dairy category? Or what about grains? Have you looked and seen which ones could be whole grains?
This is just one way to organize your grocery list that you may find helpful.
All right, it's time for our recipe demonstration. This week, our recipe is easy red beans and rice. And truly, this recipe is so simple, but it makes a nice, quick weeknight supper. And it uses mostly ingredients that you'll find in your pantry or can buy in advance to pull out in a future week for that quick pantry meal that we talked about.
This week's recipe will be demonstrated by my coworker, Allie, in a separate video. But here's the recipe. Take a look and then click on the second link to check out how she made it.
Thanks so much for joining for Lesson 2 of your 10 Tips B series. I'll see you next week for Lesson 3 when we'll talk about unit prices and saving money on fruits and vegetables.